What's going on, everybody? Today, Aaron and I are sitting down to talk about 5 Pokemon that will ruin your day in Series 7 Pokemon VGC Sword and Shield. Quite a lot to say. Basically, the idea is that Aaron and I have picked out some Pokemon that we think are really threatening right now. These Pokemon are typically more offensive, is kind of the idea. They're typically Pokemon that if you get out of position can be really difficult to deal with, really difficult to switch into. They're not necessarily the best 5 Pokemon in the format, but they're 5 of the most threatening, and if you are not careful and you don't build around them, then you could definitely have some trouble. So
also, be sure to subscribe to Panda Global. They are my idols. Please and thank you. Anyway,
Aaron, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. And for anyone that might be unfamiliar, we switched to the Series 7 rule set just a couple of weeks ago, so it basically allows for all these new legendary Pokemon that came in via the DLC, and the DLC also introduced some brand new legendary Pokemon like Reggie Lucky and some of the Galerian birds, and so there's a lot of crazy stuff. Series 7 is super different, and there are some huge offensive threats in the format right now.
Yeah, with that being said, let's just jump into it. Our number 5 Pokemon is Reggie Gigas. Or Reggie Gigas, if you want to pronounce it properly. But yeah, this is a Pokemon that has really kind of not been in the spotlight for its entire competitive history. It did get second at regionals back in 2012, but beyond that, it was kind of relegated to more gimmicky teams. However, the addition of neutralizing gas on Weezing and Galarian Weezing and Dynamax make Reggie Gigas just an absolute monster to deal with.
Yeah, super agreed. By the way, for those of you guys that don't know, Wolfey was the one who got second at regionals with Reggie Gigas, so he has the most experience with the Pokemon pre-Sword and Shield.
That's very true. Although I had my Reggie Gigas was very different. It was Wide Guard, Thunder Wave, Confuse Ray, Rock Slide, and I just wanted to para-fuse Flinch everybody, and I did. So.
Yeah, so the new build is, like Wolfie mentioned, very centered around parrying with Galarian Weezing. I think when Weezing first came out, everyone's like, oh, Reggie Gigas is going to be broken. But the reality is that there are some, good counters to that combination specifically. That being said, I think it's a really terrifying combo to go up against, especially in best of 1. Like, Reggie Gigas alone, not really that much of a threat, but paired with Weezing is just so good, is that Weezing can be really fast, and if you give it, like, max speed investment, for example, then Reggie Gigas actually being pretty speedy can max strike, lower your opponent's speed, and then that allows Weezing to go right after. So Weezing gets really good utility with attacks like Will-O-Wisp and Taunt, and so I think if you're looking for a way to stop it, obviously you want to shut down the Weezing, so applying a lot of pressure to that slot is good. Weezing is often going to want to protect in the early turns, and so if you can, call the turn in which it protects and then double up onto it the subsequent turn before Reggie Gigas gets an attack off, then, Slow Start gets activated immediately. So in dealing with Reggie Gigas, the tool is actually to not target Reggie Gigas as much, but focus on the partner, which is going to be Weezing most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one thing we didn't even really talk about is that Reggie Gigas has like incredible coverage. Like on top of how strong Max Strike is coming off of it, it has Max Hailstorm, Max Quake, it has Knockoff, which is maybe the best Dark type move in the game, so it's a scary Pokemon for sure. Going
to number 4, we have one of the brand new additions, Reggie Lucky, and I know Wolfie's a big fan of this Pokemon.
Yeah, I love Reggie Lucky. It's really strong.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, Reggie Lucky is one of the brand new Reggie forms that was introduced in the DLC, and it is really fast. It has an incredible base speed, pretty much outspeeds, everything in the metagame, and even most things with a Choice Scarf, it still outspeeds, which is kind of ridiculous. Like, one benchmark is I think you don't need any speed investment, and you still outspeed max speed Dragapult, which is just super crazy. This thing is just really speedy, and its main weakness is that it only gets electric type attacks, but it also doesn't really need much more. It has an ability that increases its electric type attacks, and so through the couple of electric type attacks you have, you can do a lot of damage, but it also gets access to Light Screen and Reflect, so you can use it kind of as a dual screens setup Pokemon, but unlike other dual screeners like Grimmsnarl, for example, it has a lot more offensive pressure. You can always volt switch to get some momentum into your favor and switch into something good in the back, and can do a lot of damage in the late game, especially if you get rid of the Pokemon that are immune to electric type attacks or resist them.
Yeah, really well said. It's a really interesting Pokemon because it's really on the line between support and offense. The electric type moves that it has are really versatile. Electro Web offers like some amazing speed control, and although in previous generations before speed would take change immediately, it probably wouldn't have been considered that valuable as support, although support Tapu Koko still ran it. But now, instantly dropping your opponent's speed and then being able to move before them is really valuable, especially on the fastest Pokemon in the game. Volt Switch makes Reggie Lucky really difficult to pin down, and it can do good chip damage things, switch in and out, allow you to position really easily. One thing is that because it's so fast, you actually don't need to invest that much in speed if you don't care about other Reggie Lucky or other like other things that aren't Choice Scarf. So you actually have a lot of EVs to play with. And although its base stats aren't like phenomenal in terms of bulk, if you invest in them, it can actually become really, really bulky. So yeah, like Aaron mentioned, although like the obvious set with this when it first came out was to use a more offensive variant with like Focus Sash or Life Orb or Magnet, I actually really like the dual screens variant. I think it's a really, really strong screen setter because it's so fast that it almost always gets a screen up. It's just an overall really flexible Pokemon, which is kind of funny given the fact that its moves are like pretty limited, or its coverage moves are pretty limited.
Yeah, that's a super good point. I think turn 1 against Reggie Lucky is probably the scariest one because it could be Choice Specs Thunderbolt, and that actually just destroys so many Pokemon in the format. And so you have to play around the idea of it being Specs, but you also kind of have to expect it to set up a screen. So it's not going to be both, but the fact is that both provide so much utility, and if you call it incorrectly, it can be super, super tough to play around. So that's a big deal. I think if you're looking to deal with Reggie Lucky, you know, a lot of people are using Lightning Rod users to at least not take any damage. Pokemon like Raichu or even Alolan Marowak, for example. Ground-type Pokemon are valuable, like Landorus, just because they don't take any damage. And finally, I think Fake Out is a pretty good answer, typically against Reggie Lucky, and maybe as the metagame develops, people will Tekken Protect more often. But Reggie Lucky often doesn't really have great room for Protect. If you're running either the Light Clay or the Specs variant, you know, you often want Volt Switch, and with this, you know, the Clay variant, you know, dual screens plus a 4th attack. And then with Choice Specs, obviously, you're not going to have Protect on that set. So, a lot of, you know, it's hard to fit Protect on the set. Fake Out is really, really valuable against it. And so, because it's a Pokemon that's typically not going to Dynamax, you can use that to your advantage. That being said, you know, if Reggie Lucky has Protect, that can be kind of tough to play around. But typically, when I play against it, I find that if I have Fake Out, it's a pretty good way to deal with it, at least on the first turn.
Yeah. Coming in at number 3, we have Urshifu. This is normally going to be Urshifu Dark. Urshifu is a Pokemon that was introduced in the Isle of Armor. It's really an interesting Pokemon because of its unique ability, which is Unseen Fist, which allows its contact moves, which is almost all of its moves, to go through Protect, to attack ignoring Protect. It doesn't ignore Max Guard, but you know, most Pokemon on the team are not going to have access to Max Guard each match. So in addition to that, it's a really scary Pokemon because of its unique move, Wicked Blow, which always lands a critical hit, meaning moves like Reflect, abilities like Intimidate, which are typically really useful in slowing down physical attackers. Critical hits ignore all that, so it's a really scary Pokemon. And in addition to that, Fighting Dark is really good offensive coverage, and it has access to Sucker Punch for priority. So typically, if you run into this thing, you're going to expect it to either be Focus Sash, Choice Band, or Black Glasses. And this is another Pokemon where, you know, if you expect it to be Focus Sash and you switch in your Tapu Fini and it's Choice Band, you might end up getting 2-hit KO'd. And I speak from experience there because it hits, like, Choice Band Urshifu hits ridiculously hard. Yeah, so that's kind of a brief overview. Aaron, did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. And, you know, previously, there were a lot of fairy types in the format pre-Series 7, right? Togekiss being one of the most common Pokemon made it kind of tough for Dark Urshifu to really thrive, but Togekiss is, you know, no longer really around. It's not nearly as prevalent as it was in the previous format. So, you know, fairies seeing falling off a little bit, especially because there's so many good steel types in the format now, means that Urshifu can thrive a little bit more. Wicked Blow just is such good coverage, and, you know, being able to ignore Intimidates makes it super valuable as well, just because, you know, crit damage ignores those stat drops. And ultimately, you know, it just hits the majority of the metagame for really solid damage. Right now in the metagame, Choice Band Urshifu is especially common with something like gets access to max Airstream, so like Thunderous plus Choice Band Urshifu has been a really, really common duo in recent weeks, just because of its ability to just like blow through with offense in the first 2 turns. It's really difficult to deal with both the Dynamax Pokemon and a Pokemon that can, you know, just attack through Protect.
Absolutely, and I think another thing that is really valuable about Urshifu is that it's a Pokemon that doesn't need to max. Having Pokemon like that, and especially Pokemon that offer a lot of offensive pressure, is really valuable in a Dynamax metagame, because you can only Dynamax 1 Pokemon per game. So although Urshifu can max, it's really not worth it most of the time. And like, yeah, it's a flexible Pokemon. I also want to note that a lot of kind of these more frail offensive Pokemon, they typically are Pokemon that they feel really awkward to bring in the back because they're difficult to switch in. But Urshifu is a Pokemon that actually can be brought in the back and still feels really strong. So yeah, like everything Aaron said is completely I completely agree with. And again, I want to give +1 to confirming the item, because like if you think it's Choice Band and you double into a Sash Urshifu that protects, that can be game ending, right? And on this, like I mentioned earlier, trying to switch into Choice Band Urshifu is really not going to be safe most of the time. You're better off trying to outposition it and not give it the chance to attack you in the first place. So
yeah, definitely. Coming in at number 2, we have another new addition to the brand new DLC, and that is Galerian Moltres. Galerian Moltres is pretty interesting because on paper, it doesn't look super threatening. You know, it has a pretty mediocre base special attack, got decent bulk, especially from the special defense side. But the thing is that it has a lot of different ways to boost its special attack. Because of its natural bulk, it's a really good user of weakness policy. You can either self-activate it with something like a self-volt switch, for example, or often, you know, Moltres is weak to a lot of common types in the format. So you can hope that your opponent will just activate the policy. So it's a really, really good user of weakness policy, and its ability Berserk can also increase its special attack if its health falls below 50%. It also gets access to Nasty Plot, so you can theoretically go from, like, you know, 0 special attack boosts to, like, up to 3 within a turn, you know, even 5 theoretically if you had weakness policy, Nasty Plot, and Berserk went off, which I think is crazy, but, like, there are scenarios in which that can happen, right? So the main thing is that typically this Pokemon will want to get multiple boosts off, but if it does, it is such a big threat, especially Dynamax, because the combination of Dark and Flying is just really valuable. There are very few Pokemon that can reliably resist both of those types, and Max Airstream is also really good, obviously, because it can boost your own speed. Moltres is already kind of a speedy Pokemon, so after a Max Airstream, it'll outspeed the majority of the Pokemon in the metagame. So this Pokemon, on paper, doesn't look very threatening at first, but after just a single Nasty Plot or a Weakness Policy boost, can completely roll through teams and also enable its partners.
Because it has both Nasty Plot and Weakness Policy, which is pretty rare, your opponent is sometimes forced into a guessing game where, let's say, you know, you have a Reggie Lucky, right? And you're like, okay, well, if I Thunderbolt the Moltres and it Dynamaxes, then like I'll probably lose a Pokemon here. I'll probably lose my Reggie Lucky. But if they predict me to ignore the Moltres because I don't want to activate the weakness policy and they go for Nasty Plot, then I've given them a free Nasty Plot. So actually, it's weaknesses to common types that Aaron mentioned and how it is really weak to a lot of the common types makes it really, really threatening because there's not many Pokemon who can hit it for a lot of damage and have it be a neutral hit, you know? A lot of it comes from super effective damage, and therefore you may accidentally activate the weakness policy. The other thing I want to talk about Moltres with is that the max moves are really, really good on it. Max Flying raises the speed of you and your partner, making Moltres set up for later and outspeed opponents, and that's really good, but Max Dark lowers the special defense of your opponent, which is also like a pseudo boost in a way, right? Like they can switch out to reset it, and if you KO a Pokemon, then it goes away, but I know that in my games, like being able to Max Dark into Max Dark and have it like be, you know, even stronger is just, it's a big deal. Yeah, we didn't even talk about its signature move, by the way, which is like Fire Wrath, which is like a spread Dark Pulse, which 20% chance to flinch, 80 base damage. It's a super solid move. Like, it's not the strongest move, especially like if you're not boosted, like it doesn't do anything, but having a spread move is always good. Having a 100% accurate spread move is always good, and if you flinch with it, it's kind of like an added bonus. So yeah, I really like Moltres in the current format.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking to punish Moltres, it really has to start with you know, having Pokemon on the field that pressure it immediately. For example, if you have really passive Pokemon like Incineroar, Dusclops against Moltres, it's just going to be a free Nasty Plot for it, and you really don't want to play passively and allow it to just get a free Nasty Plot off. Always have something on the field that can at least put on some pressure damage-wise so that they consider Dynamaxing immediately. There are some Pokemon that just do so much damage to Moltres that even if you get a policy off, perhaps you can just knock it out in the subsequent turn. So, for example, Moltres doesn't really like going up against Pokemon that have the ability to one-shot it. Glastrier is, I think, one of the more, you know, tough Pokemon for Moltres to go up against, so that can just, you know, go for a Max Hailstorm and try to eliminate it immediately.
Yeah, really well said. I think Glastrier is probably the best Pokemon to deal with Moltres. Yeah, the real thing is just about keeping offensive pressure on it. It doesn't have to be one Pokemon either. Like, you can have Reggie Lucky plus something else that you know, hits, like, is faster than Thundurus and hits it for good damage. But yeah, I think the last thing I'll say about Moltres is that it's really deceptive because, like, there will be games where, like, it looks on paper like that Moltres is a bad matchup into all 6 of your opponent's Pokemon, and it's still good. Like, and that's partially because Pokemon that should, in theory, like, beat it or have a positive matchup, like Tapu Fini, even Pokemon like Zapdos, like, can have a bad matchup depending on how the support is. Even Reggie Lucky sometimes has a bad matchup if it's slower and, like, Light Screen goes up first. So, yeah, I think Pokemon that can just one-shot it regardless, like Glastrier, like Aaron mentioned, is by far the best answer. Or Stack Attack is really good too. If you have the conditions right, but yeah, it's really scary. Oh, also Trick Room. It's really bad in Trick Room, in my opinion. But coming in at number 1 are the most threatening. What is this most threatening? Most scariest? I don't know. Pokemon that will ruin your day on the ladder is Glastrier. The new Ice type horse introduced in the Crown Tundra DLC is very strong to say the least. It's ridiculously slow with a base 30 base speed, which is one of the slowest Pokemon in the format, and although Ice is not traditionally considered to be a super great type, because Glastrier has such phenomenal bulk and really good coverage, it actually works out really well. Ice is actually a pretty good offensive type, especially as Flying is making a resurgence in the format. But yeah, like even though like defensively Ice isn't necessarily considered the best most of the time, it does have such good natural bulk that it's able to kind of circumvent that and take advantage of the offense that it offers. So this is typically going to be paired with Trick Room. Dusclops is probably its most common partner, and although in the early format people were running it primarily with weakness policy, they'd run like, you know, Brick Breaker, Rock Tomb, Dusclops, weakness policy, Glastrier, and then just go from there. I've actually seen and like used Life Orb Glastrier as well with Haze Dusclops, which is also really threatening. So we've talked about how good the base stats are, we've talked about how it has good coverage moves, but the other thing is that it has it's not a unique ability, it's named uniquely, but it's just Moxie. If it picks up a KO, then it gets an attack boost. So this is a Pokemon that can really snowball, no pun intended, a lot of a lot of pressure, because if you end up out of position, you have to sacrifice a Pokemon, you don't have Intimidate, the game can be over really quickly. There's a lot going for this Pokemon, and it's probably like one of, if not the strongest Pokemon at the moment, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think the main thing in dealing with it is, you know, ideally denying it a potential Trick Room setup, or if you let Trick Room get up, don't let Glastrier just switch in for free. Try to stall out a couple of turns of Trick Room so that Glastrier only has, say, 1 to 2 turns to attack with under Trick Room. There are some Pokemon that match up really well into it as well. Rotom Heat's something that's been picking up a little bit in usage, and Rotom Heat walls the typical Glastrier pretty hard. You know, doesn't take much damage from ice or ground. Rotom can potentially Nasty Claw, Dynamax, and just, you know, KO with the Max Flare. Yeah, I think the main thing you want to do is ideally deny Trick Room, because Glastrier under Trick Room is just so hard to beat because it's going to be attacking first, and often it can just one-shot most non-Dynamax Pokemon. And if it does and it gets an attack boost, it can chain those boosts and snowball, as Wolfie mentioned, really, really quickly. So if you can at least prevent it from getting like all of the turns of Trick Room up, that'd be really good. Confirming the item first immediately is good. If you don't see Life Orb damage, it's typically going to be weakness policy with maybe Assault Vest or something like Lumberry very occasionally. But you know, try to deduce it, especially from team preview. See if there's any way for them to self-activate a weakness policy like that Dusclops, for example. And it is, you know, one of those Pokemon where the item alone makes it tricky, even though the moveset is relatively predictable. You're going to see Ice, Ground, Fighting, Protect typically, maybe Steel occasionally. It can still be really, really tough to go up against. So it kind of reminds me of Rhyperior from, you know, early in VGC 2020, but I think it's even stronger because it works decently well as a non-Dynamax option.
Yeah, I think the real way that you have beat Glastrier, like Aaron mentioned, is a lot of it is about positioning. If it's in Trick Room, like if you, let's say they get Trick Room up and they get Glastrier and you don't have your Rotom Heat in the field and you switch it into Max Hailstorm, you're taking 60% plus Hail Chip, right? And so like even like Pokemon that are intended to beat it don't necessarily always do it. So the best way to deal with it is just to have Pokemon that can match up, like Dynamax, Kartana, Metagross, Rotom Heat, and go from, you know, not let them get Trick Room up, because if you're attacking first and if you are able to match their max on the same turn, I think it's like pretty like manageable. But yeah, in Trick Room, without like your counter to it on the field currently, like can be just game ending. So it's a really strong Pokemon. I don't think it feels like too overwhelmingly broken, but it does feel like very, very, very strong.
Yeah.
But that's our top 5 list. So yeah, obviously there's a lot of threatening Pokemon in the metagame right now. These are just 5 that we thought were particularly difficult to deal with for their offensive capabilities. But let us know in the comments what you think, like what you think are some of the strongest Pokemon in the metagame right now. Aaron, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up here?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. Some others that jump to mind immediately, Wolfie and I were thinking about, you know, Metagross has been one of the staples of the format. It's often paired with Wave that can activate, you know, weakness policy. Tornadus Metagross, for example, was super common early on. Landorus Therian, Kartana, Blacephalon plus Colosso is a duel that, you know, can potentially run through teams. That's why it's really important to actually have, you know, Fire Resist, for example. Otherwise, they can really just sweep through. So there are a lot of really, really strong Pokemon out there right now. I think, you know, from the ones that we mentioned, Reggie Gigas is probably not the, you know, the others are definitely going to see a lot. Reggie Gigas is a lot more, you know, unstandard, but can still ruin your day. Like, that's one of the Pokemon that really can ruin your day because you know what's coming your way, but it's still so hard to stop. That being said, there are a lot of really good offensive threats, and part of what makes this format, you know, scary is that you have all these strong Pokemon already, you give them Dynamax as well, and they can really, you know, chain knockouts. Now Ego is another one we didn't mention, but it's one that's been picking up in usage with Power Orb and Meteor Beam. So yeah, curious on what everyone's thoughts are. Let us know in the comments below, and thank you for tuning in.
Bye.